Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating ancient text. And this is way more than just a set of old rules. It's basically a complete blueprint for how a nation was supposed to live, given to the Israelites right as they were about to enter their new homeland. And really, this one line is the key to everything that comes next. These laws, they weren't just random. They were all designed to shape a very specific identity for a people who were seen as a treasured possession. The whole point was to set them completely apart from everyone around them. So how exactly do you do that? How do you forge this totally unique identity? Well, you do it with a whole system of laws that draws a really clear line in the sand separating the Israelites from all the other cultures, especially the Canaanites, whose land they were just about to walk into.
I mean, even something as deeply personal as how you grieve was part of this. Practices like cutting yourself or shaving the front of your head, these were actually pretty common mourning rituals in pagan cultures at the time. So by forbidding them, the law created this visible, everyday reminder that the Israelites were different.
Okay, so from there, let's look at how this unique identity showed up in what was, for them, the most important activity of all, their worship. And this is where the difference between them and their neighbors gets incredibly sharp. So the very first order of business when they got into the new land was to completely tear down the religious setup that was already there. This meant smashing the Canaanites' altars, their sacred stones, and burning what were called Asherah poles. These were sacred objects, often for a goddess. The goal was to make sure there was absolutely no mixing of faiths. And when you put the two models side by side, the contrast is just wow. Canaanite worship was all over the place, with tons of little local shrines to local gods. The Israelite model, it demanded the exact opposite. One God, worshipped at one single designated place.
And this one location rule was super clever because it did two really important things at once. First, it was all about keeping their faith pure, right? Preventing it from getting watered down with all these local pagan customs. But second, it was a powerful way to create national unity. It forced all 12 tribes to come together in one spot, helping to forge them into one single community. Even the rules around animal sacrifice were packed with symbolism. Blood was seen as the very essence of life, so it was never ever to be eaten. If an animal was a sacrifice, its blood was presented on the altar. But if you were just slaughtering an animal for dinner, you poured the blood out onto the ground, kind of like returning its life force back to the earth. Okay, so now we get to the really intense part, the severe warnings about protecting this new national identity from threats inside the community. The punishments were extreme for sure, but that's because the stakes were seen as nothing less than national survival. And, a modern person looking at this would absolutely ask, why? Why was the punishment for worshiping other gods so incredibly harsh? We're talking about the death penalty here. Well, the text gives a pretty sobering answer. You see, the snares of the land weren't just about disagreeing on theology. The surrounding cultures did things that the Israelites were told were absolutely detestable. And the most horrific example was the ritual sacrifice of children to gods like Molech. So from their perspective, the stakes were just unimaginably high. And this just shows you how deadly serious this threat was considered. I mean, no relationship was off limits. The law had to be applied without mercy, even if the person leading others astray was a prophet, your own brother, your wife, your best friend, or even an entire city. But, and this is a really important but, even with that severity, it wasn't supposed to be mob rule. There was a legal process. First, any rumor had to be investigated thoroughly to make sure it was actually true. Then, you needed at least 2 witnesses to get a guilty verdict. Only after those steps were taken could the sentence be carried out. And everything inside a city that was found guilty was considered haram, which means accursed or devoted to destruction. The idea was that it was all spiritually contaminated, so you couldn't keep any of it as loot. It all had to be completely destroyed, like an offering to God, to purge that evil from the land. But this whole blueprint for a nation wasn't just about avoiding these worst-case scenarios. It was about building a positive, distinct identity. So let's look at how that identity played out, not in these high-stakes dramas, but in the simple routines of everyday life, right down to what they were eating for dinner. The dietary laws are a perfect example of this. By defining which animals were clean and okay to eat, these rules turned every single meal into a quiet little reminder of their unique status. It was a practical, constant way of living out that identity of being set apart.
And then you get this one rule that probably makes you scratch your head. Don't cook a young goat in its mother's milk. It seems so specific and kind of weird, right? Well, it's widely believed that this was a direct rejection of a known Canaanite pagan fertility ritual. So again, the law is just drawing that clear line. We do not do what they do. And this idea of being set apart went way beyond the dinner table. It shaped their entire economy. The practice of the tithe, giving 10% of all your produce, wasn't just some religious tax. It was a foundational social and economic system that really held the whole community together. And check this out. Every third year, a special tithe was collected and basically stored in a community food bank. It was used to create a social safety net for the most vulnerable people in their society, the Levites who didn't own land, foreigners, orphans, and widows. It was a system designed to make sure nobody fell through the cracks. And what's really interesting here is that this system didn't see wealth as a bad thing at all. Instead, it saw it as a resource. Wealthy people were free to enjoy what they had earned, but it came with a major responsibility to serve others and share with compassion. They were a vital part of making this whole community care system work. And that kind of leaves us with one big final thought. This ancient blueprint, with its built-in system for social welfare and shared responsibility, was designed for a specific group of people thousands of years ago. But it raises a really interesting question for us. What can these ancient principles of community care teach our own societies today? It's definitely something worth thinking about. Thanks for joining me.